Hi, good morning to all of you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And today I'm with Brian Henderson. And well, not Brian Henderson, the newscaster, but Brian Henderson, senior leader, who is also a C-suite advisor and who has been helping many C-suite members with the mental health of their companies as the founder of Whole Business Wellness Limited. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is the Serene View, where I, Serene Singh, talk a little bit about different aspects of conscious business. And for this whole series, we are talking about the most important aspect, I think, of organizations and people right now, which is workplace mental health. So welcome, Brian. Would you like to share a little bit about your own story?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on your show. It's been a real pleasure to be here. So who am I? I'm most recently I was the COO for one of the major law firms globally. I'm from Belfast, so I'm Irish and British. I have two passports, so I got Brexit covered. I'm an advocate for gender equity and inclusion. I'm an advocate for destigmatization around mental health. I have two kids. I live in Hong Kong. I have a very small dog who luckily is out at the moment, but might make some noise in the background later. So that's me.
Well, I understand that you have had your own mental health journey and have gone through your own mental health trials. Would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've posted a lot on LinkedIn and I've done some podcasts and had articles published in the South China Morning Post. So my story's been told quite widely. But yes, I just suffered a burnout experience. With the benefit of hindsight, it turns out that's really quite a common experience. And, as I've shared it with people, many friends have said, oh yeah, a lot of that really resonates with me. So around about the end of 2019, I was diagnosed with mild depression, anxiety, insomnia. I was actually anorexic as well. I was just losing weight. And I had chronic upset tummy, chronic gastritis. So what led up to that was a whole series of different stressful events. So my wife was hospitalized with really severe asthma. That really changed her lifestyle quite radically and really was quite debilitating. We had a big restructuring going on at work. Water sports is my main stress-busting activity. We had the big typhoon that smashed up all of our kit. So my stress reliever became a big source of stress. We bought a flat in Wanchai and spent most of our life savings on that. We had this very stressful reorganization going on at work, and then I had a change of boss as well, and the transition from one boss to the other didn't really work out terribly well for me. So it was just a whole kind of series of factors. So I found myself increasingly irritable, grumpy, just firing off emails that I later regretted, or with spelling mistakes, running late for meetings, not being well prepared, struggling to focus. So lots of very, very typical signs of burnout. So in the end, I decided I was going to leave the workforce after 30 years. I was fortunately in a position where I can do that. And I just took some time, to get myself together. So doing meditation, doing yoga, doing journaling, gratitude, and so on. So a whole series of things that I did just to really recover my mental health and get myself back to, a more mentally healthy place.
I mean, what did you think were the causes of all this mental health? I mean, it's not just you, by the way. Can I say this? That 40% of people, I mean, statistically, find their work extremely or very stressful. 25% of them find it's the top stress that they have. So, I mean, why do you think people feel that way about work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think we have created work environments that do cause a lot of stress. As you say, there's a lot of research that supports that finding. The seminal book on the topic is called Dying for a Paycheck, by a guy called Jeffrey Pfeffer, which was published, I think, in 2018. And he looked at all the research and all the data that shows how the workplace causes stress to individuals. And also what's quite interesting to me is how that stress actually ripples right out through society. So, you have a run-in with your boss, you go home and you kind of shout at your partner, or you don't show the kids the kind of loving playtime that they expect. You maybe go out to drinking with your friends and get in a fight, get arrested, end up in hospital, whatever. All of that costs a huge amount to society. And it all stems from the workplace. So part of that is overload, it's overwhelm, people have got too much, resourcing's been cut, people are expected to do more with less. 75% of people say their manager is the most stressful thing about their workplace. It's just a lack of empathy, a lack of kindness, a lack of humanity in the workplace, and also a lack of purpose. People feeling like they don't get meaningful support in the workplace. They feel a lack of connection with their colleagues. And people have just been in survival mode right through COVID. Everybody's just had their head down, just surviving. And that's not good in the long term for your mental health. People need a more inspiring purpose than that.
Well, I mean, Suchi agrees with you. I mean, she relates to it and she thanks you for sharing. I think I also shared on LinkedIn about my personal burnt out end of last year. I think you are right. I mean, this whole COVID situation has worsened it all, and people are just kind of like trying to survive it right now. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it even the leaders or even a company's responsibility for mental health? Isn't it individuals' responsibility?
Yeah, I love this question. So yes, it is. It is absolutely everybody's responsibility to look after themselves. So I didn't do a great job, to be honest. So I didn't listen to my body. I didn't take action early enough. I even went to a lunch and learn about stress and anxiety, and I was sitting there and the presenter was reciting all the symptoms, and it was kind of like I had my bingo card and I was just ticking, yep, got that one, yep, got that one, yep, got that, oh, full house. And then I said to my friend sitting next to me, oh, I think I've got all the symptoms. And she said, yeah, so do I. So we both shrugged our shoulders, assumed that must be normal, just went back to our desks and carried on. So you've got to take responsibility for that. If you see those warning signs, like if you think tetchy, grumpy, tired, disengaged, just low mood, struggling to sleep, those are classics. You've got to pay attention to those and take some action to try and turn that around, which may involve professional help or it may involve just a change of your own regime. But what I see in the workplace is that a lot of workplaces are providing fix yourself solutions. So you can call the helpline, you can go to the lunch and learn, you can do the yoga, you can use the app, but that's up to you. So it's up to you, it's opt-in, and it's also a bit go fix yourself, like the organization saying, not our problem, we've done our thing, you can go fix yourself. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. So where the leader's responsibility comes in is that they are creating that environment, that culture, that system, and that pressure that's causing people to need that support. So the responsibility of the leaders is not just to provide the support, it's actually to think about it, what is it that we are doing within our organization that's creating the culture and the environment that's causing people to respond in that way. And often that is about the resourcing, the double hatting, the blurred boundaries between work and home, particularly when people are working remotely. It's about tolerating toxic bosses. It's about setting unrealistic targets and expecting people still to meet them, even though they're just not capable of it. So there are a whole number of reasons why, and there's also a lot of stigma around it, so people don't feel they can talk about their issues. So if you are feeling a little bit stressed, it's better to talk about that sooner rather than later. But even that, people feel quite uncomfortable. They feel it's a sign of weakness or failure.
Yeah. If you look at it that way, it's a combination of two things, right? Like even with you and your friend, I have it, but she has it. Everybody seems to be having it. The rest of them seem to be okay. So, why is it that I am the one who needs help, right? And how will the rest of my colleagues think about me? How will the company think about me if I am the useless one who needs help and everybody else is doing the same thing, showing the same symptoms, and they are okay, they're performing? And what do you say about that?
Yeah, well, that's exactly the thing, right? So that is where the psychological safety element comes in. So psychological safety is all about creating an environment where people do not feel afraid. So afraid to speak up, afraid to share their anxieties or their concerns, afraid to share the pressures that they're feeling, afraid that they'll be seen as weak or like the loser or whatever words you use to describe that. So, none of that language is helpful. All of that language is compounding the issue because it makes it so much harder for people to actually get the help that they need. So we do have to be really careful.
Yeah, but if I'm the leader, I mean, I have additional pressure, right? I can't collapse. And what's going to happen to my team if I am going to go to pot? And if I look at my team now, I know there are a lot of leaders on this call that probably they do care about their people, right? And they
Mhm.
can see that their people are struggling, and I'm struggling myself. If I go to pot, what's going to happen to my people?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you go to pot and you don't do anything about it, that's definitely going to hurt your team. So my experience was that, and this is again with the benefit of hindsight, I don't think I was super aware of this at the time, only to some extent. But when the leader is clearly grumpy, tired, agitated, frustrated, angry, that is absolutely going to affect your team's mental health. They're also going to think, oh gosh, clearly he's stressed. There must be something going on that I should be worried about. So you're going to make your own team even more stressed. So yes, as a leader, you have to be very tuned into that. And you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. It's a bit of a cliche, but if you're not looking after your own mental health and really aware of it and able to deal with it, then that is definitely going to infect your team. It is infectious for sure. And then the other thing is that there's all sorts of performance-related impacts when we're struggling with our mental health. So I mentioned I was struggling to focus. I was struggling to prioritize. I felt like I could never get on top of my emails. I felt like there was just a constant stream of back-to-back meetings. I was never able to focus on the next one coming up. And eventually your ability to think broadly just narrows. So it's one of the impacts of stress. It's the fight, flight, or freeze mode. You end up in freeze. And that really narrows your range of cognitive ability to think and flex your thinking. So you make worse decisions. You're less creative. You're actually less able to make social connections with your colleagues. So you're just less fun to be around. That was definitely my case. So there's all sorts of performance-related impacts here.
But is it even possible? Like, I mean, you're talking about let's like make workplace not give us all of these issues, but like, is it even possible? Because look, I don't know how many people go to work in happiness and laughter, but when people think about going to work, it's always, oh, okay, I got to work, right? It's always kind of. Is it ever possible to achieve this rather than what you're talking about?
It is totally possible. I mean, this is more, I think, a big workplace issue. We have multiple layers, you have silos, you have distant bosses and bosses that are even more distant. But, there are many, many, many examples of smaller companies which have a great culture, very supportive. I was chatting to one the other day, and he said, Brian, why would I need to teach my people about resilience? I mean, I just don't make them stressed in the first place. So it is about creating that psychological safety. Having bosses that are empathetic is something that most people complain about that are not in a positive environment. Is normally because they feel like the bosses don't get it. They don't really listen. Or even if they listen, they don't really understand. So that's for a big company to turn that around. That is a multi-year journey. That's going to take a long old time. It's going to take training, it's going to take initiatives, it's going to take education, it takes constant practice. And like any trust-based relationship, which is the basis for psychological safety, really takes work to build it up, and it's super easy to lose it. So if the bosses are doing stuff and making decisions that undermine the psychological safety, it doesn't matter what they're saying, people are not going to believe them.
So what do you think individual leaders can do? I mean, if I am the boss, like what should I be modeling or doing?
Yeah, love that question as well. So yeah, I mean, I think again, a lot of people would say that bosses make a big difference in terms of people's ability to be okay with their struggle. So if a boss is willing to share their own struggle, overnight, that can make it okay for other people. People will look at the boss and go, oh gosh, yeah, he or she's really struggling, like it's kind of normal. It's not surprising that I'm feeling something very similar. He or she seems to get it. They can understand where I'm coming from. They can understand my struggles because they're going through it as well. So that's a very hard thing to do in the workplace. Relatively few people do it. Brené Brown talked about this back in 2001 on her TEDx talk. The way that vulnerability actually drives much closer human connection and can really help with people's mental health. So that's one thing. I think role modeling healthy behaviors, so making sure that you are getting exercise, eating well, sleeping well, managing your boundaries at work, making it clear when you're online, when you're offline, when you're caring for your family and doing something else. That's super important because those boundaries have got really blurred recently. So just a few immediate ideas.
Yeah, I think Suchi is saying something similar. Okay, so clarify. I'm just clarifying with you, Suchi, to let us know if this is what you mean. It means that I think she's trying to say that we are actually looking for purpose at our work because everything else is going to pot right around us. I mean, so much COVID, we're stuck at home. We don't know where the world is going. We don't even know whether we'll beat this thing. And so now we are looking for purpose at work. And I'm not sure whether that is something. Are we, kind of expecting work to save us? Are we like, putting too much meaning into it? Is that what you mean, Suchi? If it's not, then just, yes, exactly what you mean. It's like, I fall in love with you, Brian, and now I expect you to save my entire crappy life because, you are the love of my life, Brian. You have to do it. It's something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will it work?
Yeah, it's a super question. I mean, I felt a very strong sense of responsibility for my team to really try and support them and look after their wellness in a very challenging environment. And probably I took that too personally, and that was, contributed to my meltdown in the end. So as an individual, there's only so much you can do, and a lot of it is systemic and cultural. So yeah, I mean, I think we have been through that period of just adaptation and survival, relentless pressure. We need to take a little bit of a pause and a little bit of a breather. Like anybody who's run a marathon or done an Ironman, you need the recovery time. We've just run the ultimate marathon or Ironman in the last year and a bit. People are naturally exhausted, and we need to allow people a space to talk about that and just to process all the emotion and all the frustration and all the feelings of disconnection, lack of motivation, wondering what's the point. Everybody's feeling that. So I think the organization has to at least allow for that conversation to happen. And then when they can, then we need to move on to, okay, we've changed a lot in the last year. Where do we go from here? And involve people in that discussion as well. I think just telling people where they're going may or may not be where they want to go. So you got to.
No, it's not that. What I was going to say is let's take a straw poll of our listeners, right? Those of you who are listening in on us, tell me, right? I mean, is it the job of the organization, or is it even appropriate to talk about all this kind of, stuff at work, like I'm going through so much at home, I really can't cope anymore, like all my I have relatives in India, and that's a problem. Do you think that it is appropriate for the workplace? Yes or no? Just type your answers into the comments. Meanwhile, Suchi is saying that all the system flaws just got amplified, right? All these whether it be Black Lives Matter, all these healthcare problems, everything is all just kind of amplified, and it's just come up, whereas it's been probably systematic and been around for a while. So Frank has also a comment thinking that it's all HR's fault. Yes, they should realize that they cannot do much as bosses are creating such an environment, and so they should probably do a whistleblowing. I will challenge you on that, Frank. If you think that HR isn't able to do much when the bosses are creating such an environment, who are we going to whistleblow to? Because if you're whistleblowing to HR, then maybe we are not going to get much help after all. So type your comments in, Frank, and let us know. And for those of you who are listening in for just started, we are asking the question, do you think it is appropriate at the workplace to address what else is happening? Because Brian just said that we need to acknowledge that people have stuff happening in their lives due to COVID right now. And we need to get together and talk about it. But is that an appropriate conversation for the workplace? Say yes or no. Okay. Yes. Okay. So it says, well, Suchi says expectations, targets, and KPIs didn't shift. Yeah. We should talk about that, Brian, after this. Okay. So let's finish this question and we talk about that. Talk about companies that is so pretending that COVID is not happening outside. Like there are actual companies like this. Okay. So yes, Frank agrees. So maybe we can talk about that as well. So I'm not seeing any yes, no answers. So maybe we can address Frank's one first. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think Frank and Sushi raised some great issues there. So yes, I mean, HR need to be part of the whole package here. But yes, you're right. I mean, HR cannot decide to add more resource. They cannot unilaterally change the business priorities. They can't change how the decision making is done. The whistleblower is kind of in the right direction, although it's not exactly how I would deal with it. But part of the issue is that nobody dares tell the bosses really what's going on. Like, so the bosses have set their targets and KPIs way up here. This is Sushi's point. People are actually kind of a bit broken, and they're probably down here at maybe, if this is 100, this is 70. But nobody's going to dare tell their boss, you know what, my team is broken and there's no way we can achieve that KPI, because that's career suicide, right? My boss is going to fire me on the spot if I do that, or replace me, or sideline me, or something. So the bosses are not getting to hear actually what is going on, and how broken are the people really, and what are they actually capable of delivering. So you have to adjust the KPIs for some point of time and get people in a place where they're actually able to achieve and deliver and feel like they're on top of it. And then you can move the whole game up. But if you continue to pile that pressure and people think there's just no way, those targets are way out of reach, of course you get demotivated and you lose interest and you feel like there's no point and you can't see what's the purpose of any of this. Oh, Serene, I can't hear you anymore for some reason.
All right, so can you hear me now?
Yep,
okay, so the answer is the number one phrase in 2020. I'm on mute. But anyway, yes, that's like, it's my new motto in life. Yes, but I was going to say, it seems like everybody agrees with you that we should be having this conversation. From Suchi, who agrees. There's Amy. Frank has also said yes, he agrees. Helen has said he agrees, and basically everyone says yes, we should be having this conversation. We should be talking about how broken we are and how, we can no longer pretend as a company that COVID is not happening outside. KPIs cannot be the same, expectations cannot be the same, targets cannot be the same. But my question is, who do we talk to, right? I mean, who are we going to whistleblow these people to? I mean, if your boss is not, responding, who do I talk to?
So my answer to that, and maybe it's a little bit provocative, is I don't care. I don't care who you talk to. You just need to talk to somebody. So there's a little app that I use called FormScore. FormScore is based on a very simple question, which is, how are you today? So it allows you to put in a 1 to 10 score. So today I'm probably 8, which is very good form. So I'm getting good exercise, getting good sleep, work's going well. I'm loving conversations like this one, feeling really well connected, feeling really purposeful. So that little app allows me then to share my form with my mum, my sister, a few other trusted friends. They can see my score, how I'm doing day to day. I can see how they're doing. And if any of us is kind of like 5 or below, we can just ping a little message, give each other a call, check in and see what's going on. So it's just super simple, but it's just driving human connection when you need support with people that you trust, right? So you're not going to go to HR, you're not going to go to your boss. You may not even have a best friend at work, especially if you've just joined during this remote period. So that's my answer. I don't care who you speak to. You just got to speak to somebody. And a little app like FormScore is a super easy way of connecting with people that you trust.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess this is a little bit about what we can do alone. But I think it still doesn't address the idea that, everybody, at least everybody on this call seems to agree that we should really talk about this at the workplace. We just sit down and go like, hey, my life is going to pot. We can't be pretending COVID's not happening outside. But do you see any sort of way to break out of this? If my boss is, look, my boss is in Australia. He's still living in 2019, right? What can I do? Should I just quit? Like go to a new place to work? And now I can't easily get a job, right?
Yeah.
What do I do?
That's a whole nother conversation. So I do some mentoring on the side, and I see people in that situation all the time. Those are the kind of people that come to me. My job is unbearable. I can't stand it. I just can't keep going. I cannot do this any longer. I'm really miserable. But the world outside is scary. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if I'll find another job. I don't even know what I want to do. I don't even know what my options are. And that exactly is that fight, flight, or freeze. That's that frozen, boxed in mindset. You can't see beyond just survival. So that is very, very common. And it is hard to break out of that. But you've got to think about, well, what are my options? What gives me joy? When was the last time I even felt joyful? What would be the worst thing that could happen if I did hand in my notice? How long can I survive on whatever money I've got in the bank? And see how you can, work your way through, and staying where you are and helping yourself get better by doing some of those healthy habits that I mentioned earlier might be the option for some people. For others, it might be they need to change. But one tool to help teams talk about it, one tool that we use is called Aura, A-U-R-A. That's a resilience assessment tool. So it starts at the individual level. So each individual gets a heat map of where they are more vulnerable. So it looks at your attitudinal, behavioral, cognitive, emotional, and physical manifestations of unhealthy stress. So you might be having neck tension or struggling with sleep. You might find your mind is constantly just buzzing and you really struggle to focus. You might find your emotions are really up and down and you're just overreacting to things. So all of that it captures. And then we can aggregate that to a team score. So you can then sit with the team and say, okay, this is what you're all feeling. Like you're all in this together. You're all having quite similar experiences. Of course, everybody's different, of course, but we're all having something similar. So that then starts to give you a shared language. So you've got the 5 criteria. You've got the kind of scale from thriving to struggling. You can kind of see your heat map. You can see what's most at risk. And then as a team,
I was just going to interrupt you and say this. That this sounds really good on paper, and as Chamara has very kindly, reminded us, which I kind of agree, is look, I don't know what the repercussions are going to be if this form is going to say that I'm not coping, right? I mean, it says it can cause many, many negative repercussions if this news spread negatively throughout the organization. How can I talk about this, without even minimizing negative impact, right? It would just be a whole bunch of people all saying that, yes, we are very resilient. Yes, we are coping very well, because I wouldn't dare to write anything else on that.
So the question is entirely confidential. So only you get your report, nobody else. It doesn't go to your boss. It doesn't go to anybody in the organization. It's just for you. So it lets you see where are you like most exposed, most at risk, and you can then. It then has tools and tips and techniques and healthy habits that you can start to develop depending on where your pressure points are. And then the team one is only an aggregate score of everybody in the team. There's no individual attribution or identity anywhere in there. So it's just an average across the team. And of course, there will be outliers above, there'll be outliers below, but nobody can see that. So,
no, but I've even tried it. Like people don't believe that it's anonymous. Because I think once you lose that psychological safety you were talking about, right? People don't believe it anymore, right? And so that's exactly what Chamara said, right? How can I really need to talk about this, but I don't dare to. I don't know what I can do to minimize the impact of it, And I guess like Suchi says, right? When that happens, we go into overdrive. Is this fight or flight, right? And we are paranoid. We are worried. It's not helping. I mean, what can we do even?
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't care who you speak to, and it's not going to be HR, it's not going to be your boss.
No, but I feel sorry for your mom. I feel sorry for my mom if I had to dump this on her. I wouldn't dump this on my mom.
No, I didn't dump it on my mom either.
Yes.
But I had other friends. So what's interesting about this is that quite often, it's not your close circle that you feel you can talk to about this stuff. It's the sort of next circle, people you maybe see once in a while, where you've got a good enough and trusting enough relationship. And maybe they don't know you super well, but you can then choose how much you share and how much you disclose. Whereas with people really close to you, they know an awful lot and they're going to jump to conclusions and join dots that maybe aren't joined at all. So yeah, my personal experience is that actually it's better and more effective and more comfortable talking to people that you know but not your closest circle. So you've got to be very intentional about who you talk to about this stuff.
But there's a question for those of you who are listening to this. I mean, who would you talk to? I mean, if you are worried about it, you don't know, would you talk to somebody in the office? That's the first thing. Talk to your friends. Will you talk to somebody you like what, Brian says, don't talk to somebody they are too close to, so I guess that rules out my husband, But yes, like who would you talk to? And I think the even more important question is, if I am really in that situation, do I even have somebody? And what happens if I'm drawing a blank and I'm like, I don't know anybody? Because like I told you, I wouldn't talk to my mom for sure, right? I mean, she's going through enough on her own. I mean, who would I talk to, right? Oh yeah. So Amy said yesterday, Amy, don't leave, ditch your meeting and listen to us. Come on, this is more important. I'm just kidding. See you next week, Amy. See you next week. Yes, but listen, the rest of you who are listening, right? Like, tell us, who would you talk to, and do you have somebody? Okay. Yes. So I'm going to post that so everybody can see it. Maybe some association similar to AA. So now we need SA. Hello, my name is Serene, and I have a problem with stress. Yeah.
So I mean, don't make don't minimize that or whatever, patronize that. I mean, I have mental health support groups. So these are just groups of people that have had some sort of mental health challenge or experience or diagnosis that are now in a much better place, but they find it really, really helpful to be in a group where they can just share what happens to them, what they're experiencing, what they're going through, and find that actually there's other people, even in quite small groups, that have been something through very similar. And they tell me this is way more helpful than any super expensive doctor that they've ever seen, probably more helpful than the drugs they've been on in many cases. So finding support groups is really hard to do because there's very few of them. So I'm not aware of too many others here in Hong Kong, and in Singapore I'm sure it's similar. There's probably not so much of that going on, but if anybody wants to join our group, it's always open. We do English, we can do Cantonese. So finding a group it's a bit like AA. I mean, we don't kind of sit there and say, I'm Brian, I've got depression, but we do share our stories. And recently one of the guys came in and said, I've got this really weird feeling. It's kind of like I'm on this roller coaster ride, and I feel like I'm going to fall forward. I feel like I'm going to pass out. One of the other guys goes, oh yeah, that's a panic attack. I get those all the time. Exactly the same feeling. So, I mean, it can be amazingly impactful and super supportive. So, and again, we're creating a psychologically safe space in that environment where people can be that vulnerable. And we do it on Zoom. You can switch off your camera. You can drop off the call if you want. Nobody's ever done that, but people have definitely switched their camera off and had a little cry or whatever they need. Yeah, it can be really impactful.
So I think I agree with that. I mean, if you need the support, I get in touch with Brian if you want to. I mean, I'm gonna flash his LinkedIn in a short while. And if you need to find some place that's safe, that's probably somewhere. Suchi says she would also prefer to talk to the outer circle. She also joined session today to know you are not alone. I have also had burnt out last year. Nobody is alone in this. You will not believe the number of people who text me to go, me too, after I shared my story. And this is the reason why I'm doing this whole series of panels. This is the 10th one today, because of the number of people who have sent me that. And also Sujay says he'll be comfortable to share with some of his peer friends. Wow, okay. That's very brave of you, Sujay. Because I think at the time I was going through it, I wasn't ready to share with anybody in my industry. It was only after I've gone through it that I was ready. So probably at the time where I needed help the most, wasn't the time when I was ready to, reach out. So that was one of the issues that I struggled with, at least. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so for those of you who are on the call, if you want to post any questions, you want to post any comments, if you disagree with what we are saying, please feel free to send in. Okay, so yes, Kamara has to go for a meeting. So all right, thanks for coming, Kamara. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Yep. And for those of you who if you need to drop off, like what they say from the Zoom call, please feel free. But for those of you who are staying, with any questions, just drop us a question into the post. And let's talk about it. Yeah. And for those of you who are wondering what question you're asking now is, do you have a friend to talk to if you are under a lot of stress, and who is that friend, or who do you have anyone ever in effect to talk to? Yes. So now I'm going to ask you one last question, Brian. Out of all of this that you have gone through, right? Everything they have gone through, whether it be your personal experience, whether it be helping other business leaders, what is the one lesson that you take that you feel, you have got to share with the world?
Yeah, I think it's my very simple summary is you have to work on your self-awareness. So what's going on here? How am I feeling? Really pay attention to that. The body, often talks louder. So it was my physical symptoms that made me go to my doctor when I just could not sleep and my tummy was just in a mess. That's why I went to my doctor, and that's actually too late, but often that happens. I've heard that story from many, many friends since. So you've got to take action, and the earlier you take action, the better. And if you're not too sure, should I be worried, should I not be worried, then definitely ask somebody. You can ask a counselor, you can ask your general practitioner, you can ask someone like me if you happen to have anybody like me in your network. Just get a second opinion, see, should I be worried? So, don't be shy, seek help, seek understanding, seek information, and do something about it.
No. And I think from my own experience, I will say, if you are asking, do I need help? Is something wrong with me? The answer is yes, you need help. If you're even asking that question, I don't know if Brian agrees, but what I feel is if you're even asking the question, yes, you need help, go see someone, right? And I agree with that. The earlier, the better. And for me, it's really because I think there's a lot of impact on the ones around you, your loved ones, the people at work, even your friends. There's a lot of impact that when you are going through that phase, you may not be aware of. But really, even if you can't do it for yourself, do it for the people you love, right? And go and see someone. So one last question. So just says, for organizations that won't recognize the pandemic and won't want to change any goals, any KPIs, so as business leaders, what do you do? How can we contribute to this change?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. I think there's actually a lot of data around the business impact of unwellness in the workplace. So the one single stat, I'm just going to give you one stat. So 35 days per person per year, that's working days per person per year, are lost due to presenteeism. Presenteeism is when you're feeling ill, you're feeling unwell, you're feeling unfocused, you're feeling like you can't cope, whatever that is. You go to the work anyway because you don't want to take a sick day, but you're just not able to function. You're not able to really be productive or creative or solve any problems. So if you think about that, 35 days out of maybe roughly 220 working days in a year, that's about 15%. On top of that, you've got absenteeism, you've got staff turnover, people that just give up and quit because they don't think they're ever going to get support in the workplace. So the bottom line impact is something between, I reckon, 20 to 30% of net profit for every company everywhere in the world. The WHO, I think it was, estimated it's like a $1 trillion global GDP impact. It's massive. So quite why investors and shareholders are not jumping up and down like they have been with other ESG issues, I don't know, but I'm lobbying BlackRock and anybody else that will listen, and that will get on the agenda very soon.
Okay. I mean, I just want to share some stats, right? So 2/3 of people have reported greater stress. More than half have reported greater anxiety. And catch this, 14% are so challenged that they claim to be non-functional. Okay, so when they did a 7-country report, they say that more than half of the people are emotionally exhausted, they are more irritable, they are more confused. So, I mean, if you have half your workforce exhausted, stressed, anxious, and confused, I am not going to say that that's not going to impact your bottom line. I'm hard pressed to say that that's not a business concern, and it's not a small thing that we're talking about. This is 7 countries survey, right?
Yep.
So that's something just for you to take back and perhaps to share with the people that go, hey, maybe we should look at this, and it may be more helpful to do this to improve our KPIs than anything else that we do in our organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if you don't believe in compassion, kindness, and humanity, you can believe in the bottom line impact. If you're that cynical.
Correct. Yes. I think that's what business leaders all believe in. Okay, so it's been wonderful talking to you, Brian. I really appreciate it. If there's one thing that you want to leave our listeners with, what will be it? I mean, obviously, besides your LinkedIn, which I'm now leaving. What else is one thing you want to leave our listeners with?
I think just keep the conversation going. So, mention this conversation to somebody today at lunchtime. Just say, I was on this call this morning. This is what we talked about. Just engage people in the discussion. The more people engage in discussion, the more progress we're going to make. Yeah.
And for those of you who are wondering, I mean, if you missed any of it, the recording is on the same link. It'll be there forevermore. This is the internet. It lives until, my grandchildren's generation, I presume. Yes. So you can just watch it whenever you want, share it with a friend. This is Brian's business, which is Whole Business Wellness. And he's really talking about how to get the whole business to be well. So do connect with him. And yes, thank you very much, Suchi, for coming. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of you guys as well. And thank you to Brian for sharing your story and for sharing all your insights. Thank you. Next week, I'm talking. Oh, sorry. I should let you talk.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thanks so much for having me on.
I was going to say next week, I'm talking to a psychiatrist from the Institute of Mental Health here in Singapore. He's in charge of workplace wellness. And we're doing it on Thursday morning on a public holiday at 8:30. So you can see how committed he is. This is a bureaucrat public servant who's coming on to talk about workplace wellness in Singapore as a whole and what they're seeing is happening, here in Singapore. So Sujay says, welcome. Welcome, Sujay. Welcome, Johnson. Good morning to you, Johnson. Yes. And welcome. Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you. All right. So see you next week then. Bye-bye.